You know how people have beautiful desert city builds or picturesque fantasy environments for the villagers in their Minecraft world? Well, we don't have that, and this is what we've got for our world's villagers so far. Yeah, not exactly the best place to live. So in this episode, I want to change this by starting to convert this barren island that's full of creeper holes into a thriving alchemist-themed city that's brimming with magical lore and wonder. So let's get to it. Hey everyone, welcome back to our survival let's play world here in Minecraft 1.16. If you're new here, this series is a humble vanilla survival let's play where we take things at a somewhat slow but sustainable pace. Hope you stick around to see more, and if you're not new, glad to have you back. Regardless if you're a new or returning viewer, I hope you're ready to have some fun as we start our villager city over here on these desert islands. And so, what we want to do is create a safe place to house all of our villagers that we trade with, and just, make this area a bit more lively because right now, it's not in good shape. Yeah, as you saw in the intro, this area is not pretty, and I am 100% to blame from this. As this is the closest body of land to our island base, this is my go-to area for hunting charged creepers during thunderstorms. You can also see the remnants of when I tried to start the villager trading area, but I think aside from the oasis in the middle, I'm going to scrap this entirely. So cutting down the trees and getting rid of this path, all of that. And then also maybe make a bit more of a prettier storage area since we are going to be out here for quite a bit. Oh yeah, and I also have a bunch of friends from the Halloween event, let's call it. Yeah, lots of spooky friends. Wait, what? Why is that villager? Whatever, okay. Regardless, yeah, we have this to avoid as well in this project. Alright, so without further ado, I'll get to cleaning up this area and then we'll figure out what to do after that. Okay, this place cleaned up pretty nice. Minus all these torches, that is, but that's okay. I don't really want to deal with mobs in this episode because we will be doing a lot of building. So aside from filling in the holes, I really didn't do much. Just kept it very similar to the natural terrain, and I also kept the oasis, of course. I did leave these holes which lead to a very vast underground, not only mine shaft, but just cave and ravine system. And actually, might as well just show you real quick. Yeah, so pretty extensive. This is actually where I've been doing a lot of my mining back when I was doing the resource gathering / break. So that's where all of those things came from. But we will not be dealing with any of this today. So before we start building over in this area, I do want to gather some more resources as all of our sand has essentially been exhausted by filling in all of these holes around the terrain. Related to that, so we'll need sand, but I also need another block that goes well with prismarine. And so this might be a little bit of an odd combination, but what I was thinking is red sand. And so rather than pillage the Badlands to the very far east, even though we do have an elytra and it's easier to get out there now, there is another Badlands that's actually closer to spawn, so it's in the northeast direction that way. So what I was thinking is I'll just fly over there and gather as much as I can and bring it back so that way we have plenty of this material to work with, so we can just really go to town with building all of the structures out of these blocks. So I don't really know how well this is going to work in practice in terms of the texturing and the color palette, especially since we have a fairly limited supply in 1.16, but we'll do our best. And as always, you can update builds, so that's something that's also an option. But for now, the goal is just to get the villagers over here, and to do that we're going to need some resources. So I'll fly out there, and once I'm out at the new mesa, I'll probably start recording again. Okay, I just recorded a whole bunch of footage without my voice. Awesome. So long story short, we did find the Badlands biome. It's farther away than I thought. And fortunately, it's not all plateau area. And there are some patches such as this where there's plenty of red sand. Oh, and we also traded with Bob, and he gave us some ice and some blue dye and some ferns. Thank you, sir. True businessman. Travels thousands of blocks just to make a trade. Anyways, so what I'll do is I'm just going to go to town and collect as much of this red sand as possible, and probably also get these dried up bushes, because these are not renewable to my knowledge. And yeah, since we do plan on resetting these chunks, don't worry Bob, hopefully you'll not be here when we do that, but we do plan to reset these chunks because there are areas of interest and biomes that we want to visit once we update the world. So I believe there's a mangrove swamp as well as a similar Badlands biome, but it's quite a bit larger. And I also believe there are some mushroom islands somewhere to the south. I don't recall off the top of my head, but regardless, these chunks are temporary, so let us take full advantage of that and get as much of this delicious red sand as possible. I didn't see a desert nearby, but I will try and collect some sand as well. We shouldn't need a ton, as this will only be for decorating the ground of the desert. And the reason for this is I don't really use sand to make glass. I trade with villagers to get it, since that's a far more renewable source. So yeah, that's why we don't use that. Anyways, I will catch you after this cut, and hopefully by then we are ready to start planning out the city and start construction using our new materials. So look forward to it. Okay, catch you later. Okay, so we are back on the desert islands, and I've already started to lay out what I want the town to look like, and I'm doing so in the form of slime blocks. So in terms of gradient, this is what I'm going to try and use, although I will admit this is my first time using gradients, so we'll see how it goes. In terms of resources from the trip, I was able to get quite a bit of red sandstone, which is exactly what I needed, and some additional red sand as well. And I've already put away most of the sand, but got a bit of that too to the desert. That was to the north and east of the Badlands biome. So yeah, ample materials to build with, and even some terracotta, just to see if we can mix that into this. This is orange terracotta. So in terms of the layout, let me just kind of fly around here. So we're going to have a couple of houses here on this, let's call it a river for now. And over in this corner over here, we're going to have a small farming building. So amidst all these torches that are just littering the ground, I have these lanterns as a crude path marker for where we want the walking paths to go. And for this area, what I'm thinking is this will be a rounded building with arches, and it will be more or less an indoor-outdoor building. The exact design I have not come up with yet, but that's what I have preliminarily. The path will continue, and I'm thinking it will go into here, where ultimately this very large round building will go, but I don't think we're going to get to that in this episode, since that is quite a undertaking. And because this will be an open building with arches, we will be able to exit out this way, and I'm thinking this could be somewhat of a square, where we have a lot of path here and just room for details. Essentially, this area here is reserved for a large building and possibly a small blacksmith right there at the entrance to the small canal. The path will continue up here, and I'm thinking of putting crops here, just a small little farm, and that's more or less what we have for the planning stages. So here's what it'll look like, just laying out. As you can see, I have not gotten around to building a nice little outdoor storage unit yet, but hopefully I'll get to that in this episode. So that's where things stand. I'll do my best to accommodate this gradient to all of these buildings, and I guess I'll just get to work, because none of these are designed in creative or anything, so this is probably going to take a while. So bear with me, please. So I do have everything ready, so I'll go ahead and start building. These are going to be pretty small houses, and for the time being, they're going to house the priests. Yeah, so I want to bring these up just enough so it feels spacious, but not too much. And then as to whether or not we'll keep this diagonal orientation for this third house, I'm not too sure yet, but we'll see where this takes us. So I wanted to use these as the structure pillars since they look more sturdy than, say, the walls and whatnot. So something like this, yes. Okay, and then from this, I want to make a small arch for each of these. That way we can put a fence here and the villagers cannot get out. And we can of course put carpet over that so we can get inside if need be. So generally the core concept here is I want to make these villagers seem like they're pretty smart and that they've really designed the city and been here for quite a while. AKA they know what they're doing and they're teaching me their ways. Essentially, they were the ones to give us enchanting and understand magic far more so than I do. So let's use that as our axis of creativity, if you will. Yeah, so fairly simple house like so. And then for the roof, that's what I want the red sandstone for. Because what I imagine is that this is a thermal material, or it's really good for insulating from the desert sun and heat. So that's why this is on top. So yeah, if we have this orange roof, I think it contrasts pretty nicely. I don't know if we'll have a ton of opportunity to ruin these or do gradients, but we'll see how it pans out, to be honest. These aren't really big houses, as I alluded to earlier, and yeah, we'll see what we can do. At first I was doing flat roofs because I was thinking along the lines of solar panels. Something, you know, energy, magical, but I decided to move away from this just because the flat roofs just, I went through several variations and none of them really looked good at all, I would say. Also, I am struggling to place this, my goodness. There we go. Okay, so pretty simple, and of course I forgot the sea lanterns. Alright, and because they know the technology and they've clearly conquered their own ocean monuments, they have access to this technology too, hence why we're using these blocks for the city. Also, the color changing nature of these it just really says magical to me. I don't know if anybody feels the same way, but if you do or don't, let me know in the comments. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm just gonna finish. There we go. And then maybe we'll put some slabs here, just to give it a little bit more variety. So yeah, something like this. To me, this looks pretty efficient in terms of thermal insulation. The roof is, it's whatever, but it gives a little bit of trim, so that way when you're looking from above, you can see a little bit of the contrast. Although it looks much better from this vantage point, I gotta say. Okay, now for this part. This will probably look better. Oh yeah, definitely. What would be good to put here? I'm not really sure, to be honest. Stone is kind of whatever. Maybe dark prismarine? I think that would look pretty neat. Something like this? On the fence about it, although it does look like it's a very cool material in the thermal sense, so you don't want hot surfaces in the desert, especially if you're living here, so that I think that'll be okay. I don't love this, but it'll do for now as well. Okay, for this house, I guess I'll just give it the diagonal a shot since the spacing is pretty good. I think the barn over in the island next to the base, that was the first time I had built something using diagonals, so hopefully I can replicate something cool. Okay, sure. I just feel like this is not going to work very well. And then we can't really put windows in it. Okay, we're not gonna do this. Alright, instead, I think I'm just gonna build it like so. And then over here, I am thinking that I could decorate this with window. And then how about we keep this a solid wall to give them a little bit of privacy for the rest of the village and the path that will eventually go along this way. I think this also leaves enough space in between the two, so that's really pleasing, I would say. Maybe we can decorate this even more by making, yeah, that kind of window. I mean, honestly, we could even just make it a whole spanning window, since that is a pretty good view. Then you have kind of a jar shape there. And then for all of these, I'm just going to keep the roof design the same. There, that gives it a little bit of differentiation from the house over there, but then it also has a similar kind of thing. That is kind of too similar, huh? And then yeah, bed and brewing stand, and yeah, should have a pretty happy villager here. Alright, last one. This one should be pretty simple. Same 4 pillars as before. And then for this side, I was thinking doing a little design, and then mixing this in with prismarine wall. And then lastly, making some nice little windows in the back, as well as the side. Something like that. Yeah, that works. It's a little weird seeing this depression here, but I think it'll do. Keep that the same. Could mix this one up a little bit. Alright, same lighting as before. Then we will add slabs to the top to give it that nice little extra bit of color. Then of course, upside down stairs. Okay, yeah, those are pretty similar from the top. Alright, looks good. And then, of course, I'll need to put the fence and carpets there, but only once we get the villagers in their beds and the interior all arranged. Okay, for this next building, it's pretty complicated. I made it in creative, so I'm probably just gonna time-lapse it. So yeah, enjoy the time-lapse. Okay, it's been about a week and a half since I last recorded, and the reason for this is I was hit with some unbelievably bad allergies last week, and this necessitated some serious deep cleaning and dusting of my entire place to get rid of these allergies. So naturally, since I was a congested and sneezing mess, I didn't really want to record audio in my gross state, so in light of that, I was able to focus on building, and I made a ton of progress off camera, which is good because at the pace we were going with building these things, this episode was going to be like 2 hours long, which is not, no, let's not do that. And so, because I was able to spend a lot of time just focusing on building and making it look good, here it is. And I think it turned out really, really nice. Naturally, even better with the shaders on, but yeah. So I was not able to incorporate this gradient into these builds, mainly because they're too small, I feel, to really get that to work. But we'll see once we update the world and get some new block palettes, whether or not this village can be updated in the future and whatnot. Oh, speaking of the updates, I really like the name Tricky Trails. That's such a fitting name for that update. But let me just walk through the build, and I guess we can start in the center after you saw the time-lapse of this thing. So the original idea for this was a congregation point, or a town center, where the villagers would mingle, and this would just be where all the stuff was happening. But it ended up being more of like a monument and center point for the entire village. So functionally, it doesn't have any current use other than providing shade to the villagers and golems. But I hope that it does look like a little bit of a magical monument, because the overall theme here is magic and alchemy, because these villagers are very good with magic and smart. Yeah, hopefully it kind of looks like a large garden structure or something along those lines. You know, it's kind of analogous to those larger structures that you would find underwater in the ocean. And longer term, while it doesn't have a specific use in mind now, I was thinking of making this an entrance to the underground portion of the city, where, say for example, there's a grotto or an underwater lake cave. But for now, hopefully it's just an eye-pleasing center landmark in the village. Alright, so moving back to where we constructed the houses, we have this nice little shaded bench to the right, and then we kept the oasis essentially the same. The only thing I added was these end rods to the trees, so it's kind of like they're producing this very slender, illuminating fruit. I think this helps light up the area because I was having a bit of trouble with mob spawning, and certainly I'll have even more trouble once I remove these torches, but for now I just want to keep the villagers safe. But yeah, not too much changes over here. For the path going through the village, I used a combination of stone, grass blocks, and the path block. And then due to the width of the overall path, I incorporated these in-ground lights where it looks like they're being powered by this orange material that we used on the roofs. So kind of continuing the theme that this is a very heat-resistant or electric conducting block, and it's powering these lights in the path. So over here we have this jungle tree, which I just was a little bit lazy and I didn't modify it other than putting the end rods on it. Some small decoration here. And then if you go to the right here, I really wanted to include a fountain, but it doesn't really make sense to have this in the desert because this would evaporate immediately. So for this spring, I wanted to continue the lore of these dark prismarine blocks in the sense that thermally they're a lot cooler than the surrounding environment for magical or whatever technological reason. And by being cooler than the environment around them, they counterbalance the natural evaporation you would have in the desert, which thereby allows the spring to stay, wetted and free-flowing without the loss of water to the environment per se. So just adding a little bit of lore into there, and you can see that it's a lush area and these plants are benefiting from the lower temperature that these blocks produce. And then continuing on to the farmer's house, you can see that this thermal phenomena is continued here in the lore, where they use it to insulate the soil and keep the water in the ground here. I went for this shaded feature because I feel like the crops would need some shade in the desert due to the abundance of heat. Even though carrots can be grown in sandy soil, I think they would need a lot more water than the desert would provide, so kind of combining these two aspects make it feel a little more realistic to me. But I would love to hear whether or not this is silly or a little too imaginative, or if it's just like right on the money for the lore. So let me know in the comments if you could, I would appreciate it. And so you might notice that this house is quite a bit bigger than the others, and I wanted to make the farmers a little bit more, let's say, well off, in the sense that they could afford very expensive stuff like wood. Speaking of, I really tried to avoid the use of wood in these builds, because there are so few trees here, and I want to imagine that this is like worth its weight in gold. And so that's why very few buildings use the wood in this overall build. So I made the farmers have a very nice house because they've been really good stewards of resources in the village. As water is a really scarce technology, they've been able to find a way to feed the rest of the village and have not been, monopolizing the resources. So because of that, they're respected throughout all the village. Yeah, that's kind of the lore I had in this. So that's pretty much it for the farmer's house. Moving over here, we have a path that continues, so I wanted to really connect all these paths, so you can go under, you can go around, and even in the monument you can walk up it to the second level and have a better overview of the village. I hadn't really seen the villagers use this, but maybe if I put some job blocks, that would entice them to go over into this area. But anyways, the paths are all connected, and it brings us to this, I guess, the end point of the village, where we have both the Blacksmith Guild as well as the inn. And both of these builds took a very, very long time. I want to say with the farmer's house, that only took like a couple hours. I didn't struggle too much aside from like incorporating a little bit of variety in the interior up there. But these I definitely took my time to design. Okay, so walking through the Blacksmith build, I wanted to give them an overall open layout inside so there's plenty of room for them to work. But I also wanted to incorporate this water wheel in the back. And so because I had this water wheel and I wanted to make it functionally make sense with this open forge and overall Blacksmith Guild concept, this took a while to build because I also wanted to take into consideration the airflow and just the working environment of these villagers in here, since this would be a very hot room to, I guess, do your work in the desert. They have a lot of thermally insulating material and a lot of airflow. Okay, so the combination of high airflow, an open forge layout, and this water wheel made it really difficult to incorporate all these features together. And here's how I kind of merged everything. So the water wheel provides turning to this fan, and this heats the forge. And then this in turn gives them the lava, which is at the center, and so they're able to do their work in this open space. And since it's indoors in the desert, you can imagine this is just unbearable to work in. And so I added these grates, which should provide airflow from the river, sweeping the heat from this side of the building to here, and it would also supply the sufficient amount of oxygen needed to power the forge in the middle. And then you can see in the top layer there are some openings to accommodate a little bit of open airflow and just help with the temperature regulation of this place. So that's what I really had conceived for this building, and maybe I restricted myself a little bit too much, but I thought overall the merging of these things ended up for a really cool concept. But yeah, again, happy to hear what you all think in the comments. All that to say, I know it does not look like much in the interior or exterior given the size of this building, but I really put some extensive thought into how to design and lay out this building. Alright, so the last building we have is the inn, and this by far took the most time, not due to the complexity of the interior, but really the details on the outside of the building. I want to make some extra beds here, just in case we have some just villagers floating around like this fisherman here. But yeah, here's what we have. So we have a small foyer with an entrance and just kind of a little table where villagers can eat their breakfast. And then we have a receptionist or inn owner over here. And then you have two small rooms in the back here with really nice views of the ocean or the town square. Eventually, I think I can add on to this build by adding a patio over here and maybe a small fishing dock or something like that. But for now, I like how this turned out. Again, keeping with the cooler temperature theme of this block, we see it featured on the first level of this building. So going on to the second level, pretty simple, just a small little open area, which leads to two larger rooms that are decorated a little bit, again with really nice views of the ocean. And then over here, we just have a small porch that's enclosed, so if you want to enjoy the view without windows, or you don't have shaders, then one could do so over here. And then here's the other room, which is essentially identical to the other. Again, I tried to balance giving this place a roomy feel, but also cozy at the same time. Hopefully that makes sense. This is just our viewing structure. I'm using that to make the thumbnail, so I don't think it will stay, but I do kind of like the weirdness of it, but yeah, that's not gonna stay. Because the monument ended up being more of a revered and kind of not really congregation spot, this ended up being built to address the shortcoming of that. So here is where ideally the villagers would mingle and you could like find a bulletin board, jobs, you know, the town square, if you will, which is actually a circle. Don't look at me like that. Okay. And then finally, going up here, we kept the natural terrain of this, and I wanted to have a small shop here where the masons will sell their wares up here. And then because this area was a little plain, I wanted to add this map of the island before things were constructed here. Although you can see that there's a little bit of the old oasis there and the trees that we built around episode, I want to say 11 or 12. And then here is a very odd looking palm tree. And what I had in mind when building this, because I intentionally wanted to make it a little bizarre, is that this palm tree had died due to lack of water on the hill, but the villagers were able to revive it. And naturally it drooped quite a bit and looked weird, so that's what gave it its weird shape. So this resurrected palm tree, like the other trees in the village, has end rods, and it just serves as a little nice landmark over here on the raised part of the village hill. And then lastly, we have this nice little bench here, which you can see a little bit of the oasis, and just kind of take into view this monument as well as the other parts of the village. So yeah, I think this turned out super, super well. I am so proud of this, and this is easily like the biggest build I've ever done. So hopefully others would agree. Let's get a better vantage point from up top. Okay, maybe I gotta wait for the sun to go down. Yeah, but aside from not being able to incorporate the gradient, which I really wanted to do it, but I just felt like given the size of these buildings and the fact that I was taking so long, I didn't really want to delay this episode even further. And then also I didn't manage to succeed in making an outdoor storage area, so maybe I need to build a place for myself, because right now on this island I don't have a place to stay other than the inn right there. Okay, there's less glare, awesome. But yeah, overall, I'm just so pleased with how this turned out, even though this is just the beginning, because we have all this area to expand out and like build a dock and like a thriving port over here. And then we have like more area on the other island to build different types of houses and whatnot. And then of course we have this giant mountain in the center, which ultimately I want to build some sort of tower-like structure to house all the alchemists studying magic and books and all that stuff. And there's even more area over here. Ooh, I could probably light this up a little bit more, but mobs aren't spawning, so I guess that's okay. But yeah, here it is at night. Yeah, I am just so proud of this. I think it has a lot of potential for after when we update the world. But yeah, that's what I have, and I really hope that our village does embody that magical and like mythical theme of alchemy and kind of just gives that vibe. But if not, I would love to hear your comments of how to improve this below, either pre-update or even post-update once we have all the new blocks to play with. I know the end kind of seemed a bit rushed and was very much the I did a little bit of mining off camera meme, but I really didn't want to belabor the trial and error process and just kind of bore everyone with how long these took to build. I just wanted to avoid having a lot of footage of me building and rebuilding and just taking down stuff, and so that's why I wanted to just focus solely on these buildings, plus I couldn't record due to the allergies, so yeah. Regardless, I hope you were able to enjoy this episode and maybe come up with some inspiration for your own worlds. As always, I appreciate all of you watching, wishing you a wonderful rest of your week. Take care, and see you next time. Bye bye for now.